I've not long got back from a 2-week holiday in the Scottish Islands and the weather was awful, even in mid-June, but I would still definitely go back next year, and this is why. Look, as many of you will know, and as I know well, British weather, and most precisely Scottish weather, doesn't have the best reputation, even going there in the summer months. Starting off on the southern island of Barra and then working our way northwards over 12 days on the islands, we had a difficult time of it with the weather. Being an optimist, I decided only to take one set of winter clothes because I thought, really, how bad can it be? However, this limited set of winter clothes ended up being the clothes I wore most often on our trip because the weather meant that I couldn't wear shorts more than 2 days of the entire time on the islands. Okay, so far no surprises, I hear you saying. So why on earth would I want to go back to this wet and windy landscape that doesn't even get sunshine despite almost 20 hours of daylight in the summer months? The answer is simple. It's precisely because of this weather that makes the Western Isles of Scotland such an attractive holiday destination. Now, I know that might sound counterintuitive and like what I've just said, but bear with me. Yes, you have to endure some of the worst elements of the Scottish weather, but when you get those glorious moments of sunshine, it makes it all the more worthwhile. Now, I like a warm sunny holiday as much as the next person, but there is something magical about being out in the elements up in Scotland and then seeing that sunny window pop up most unexpectedly, and there's hardly anyone else around to enjoy it. This means that the beaches you will walk on are not only some of the best beaches you will ever see anywhere in the world, and I say this after having lived in Bali for 3 years and also the Mediterranean, but they are almost deserted to boot, and you can have them pretty much to yourself even in summer months. Having beautiful scenery and absolutely world-class beaches is one thing, but to see them almost as your own private getaway just adds to this immense feeling of being somewhere completely different and unique from what I've always associated with the British Isles. The feeling of seclusion is also such a welcome respite from the modern world. Sure, it does come with some niggles like having very few places to eat out, but going some time without things like phone signal is a welcome problem to have in our manic modern day always on society. On top of that, the locals are extremely friendly on the Western Isles and happy for tourists to go there, so they welcome you with open arms, which makes for a really warm and enjoyable place to visit. The welcome only gets warmer if you learn a few phrases in Scottish Gaelic, as the locals' eyes will light up if you say even just thank you to them in the local tongue, and it goes a long way to help make your stay that much more positive. In fact, the local language of Gaelic is also another magnetic draw of these islands, especially if you're a language nerd like I am. Hearing this language being used in everyday life, which is considered a dying language, quote unquote, is absolutely a marvel to behold. To be there is to experience the vibrant Gaelic language community and to see people interacting in this language that on the mainland is struggling for its very survival. So enthused were we at hearing the language that we picked up a book of everyday Gaelic phrases, so the next time we go back we can use a little bit more to try and communicate with the local, and if you hear a hint of what sounds like an Irish accent, they were a native Gaelic speaker. And when I used the word tapoleva or tapole with them just to say thank you, depending on their age and the formality, they really did look absolutely delighted, and it surprises them because so few people learn the language. If you're in the town of Stornoway, you can go to the Gaelic Community Cafe, where they will teach you a little bit of Gaelic in exchange for a 10% discount on the lovely coffee and cakes as we had. Now, the staff there were fantastic, and they help you along just to say phrases like "Goi mi cappuccino" would mean please gotta have a cappuccino. It's a good fun place to be. It's also a community hub for learning the language and getting involved in the local culture, and they have music on there, maybe even poetry readings, so definitely if you're in Stornoway, go and check that out. I'll put a link to it below. The Gaelic Community Cafe. Now, coming back to the broader point about the islands, the limited offer in terms of shops and places to eat means in turns that you make up for it by spending more time outdoors. Now, this is almost an enforced choice. I know you're not going to go to the Western Isles for shopping, but it really focuses your time on the local area outdoors. Sure, Stornoway has a few great shops and some nice local amenities and services, but it is only that place on the Western Isles where you can get anything of a shopping experience. Now, after our first 8 days on the island, going to Stornoway felt like a metropolis by comparison to all the other places that we had been. Now, this had the dual benefit of making us both appreciate shops and local services all the more, but also reminding us that what we came for was both the natural environment and the wonders that these islands hold. Now, I said the weather isn't great even in midsummer, but going to the islands in midsummer has benefits even if the weather doesn't play ball. When we were there, it only got dark close to midnight and it was light again before 4 a.m. This means that your outdoors time is maximized and you can keep doing activities right from the early hours of the morning until about 11 p.m. quite comfortably. Given these really long, wonderful days, you will get a window of good weather on most days that you are there, and so you almost always have time to enjoy the weather in the daylight. There's culture out on the islands that you don't get anywhere else, and it's probably a place you don't know much about, as I didn't before going. There's so much to learn about the local culture and history. Take for instance the incredible village of traditional stone cottages with thatched roofs called the Black House Village. This gave an insight into weaving and fishing traditions that I had no idea about previously. We visited the Black House village of Gaelic. There's also the Scottish Stonehenge on the Isle of Lewis, called Callanish. Now, this is a site I'd not heard of previously, but it's actually quite a lot older than Stonehenge, and it's a massive ancient stone circle with so much history. In fact, it's very different to Stonehenge in that you could even get it to yourself like we did for a brief 45-minute period where we got to wander around and see it and feel the magic of the place for ourselves. There's also all these wonderful stories from the local history, just like the Lewis chessmen, and that only adds to this sense of intrigue and history and culture. The Lewis chessmen was an ancient chess set about 1,000 years old, found only 150 years ago in the dunes on the Isle of Lewis. A fantastic story that's definitely worth reading more about if you have the time. You'll also see Peter May's crime thrillers everywhere you go for sale on the island, with connections to local stories like the Lewis chessmen, but also with their own twist. The remoteness of the place also adds a richness to the flora and fauna and its wildlife, backed by dramatically rich landscapes that look like images of Norway. The Macha, the name for the unique local grassland and wildflowers close to the shore, are magical and not to be driven on by campers, but they have that special je ne sais quoi aspect of making you feel like you are somewhere different. Expect to see owls in broad daylight. We had 8 owl sightings across just 2 days, which made driving a little hard as I kept wanting to stop on these narrow roads just to get a shot, but it really wasn't possible because twice we were on a causeway. But that's more than I've ever seen owls in broad daylight in the rest of my life. There's rabbit holes everywhere, some of which look like you'd almost get inside them, across these wild landscapes by the dunes and the hills that roll onto the beach. It's just fantastic to see such an abundance of wildlife in ways you don't get back on mainland Britain very often. But one thing to note about the wildlife is that they often let their bulls roam freely as well as their cows, as we found when we pulled up on Vatersay to the south of the island of Barra. So maybe just keep an eye out for any ringed nostrils and rather large looking cows roaming freely. Being out on the islands, you still get a taste of island life while still being in the UK, something which feels a million miles from the hustle and bustle of London or even the much closer big cities of Glasgow and Edinburgh. As someone from the UK, being on the islands felt completely new yet familiar at the same time, which was a really interesting feeling, the kind of thing you go on holiday for. New experiences in new places. Now check out my next video here for more travel takes and tips, and I will see you there.